The first shot of America's wars was never fired on a battlefield. It was typed, quietly, on paper. Long before soldiers marched, before generals unfolded maps, before the public learned to chant slogans about freedom and destiny, numbers were already moving. Ledgers were already filling. Fortunes were already being positioned like troops, invisible but precise. The war came later. The money came first. On a gray morning in New York City, as the fog crawled low between stone buildings and the sound of shoes on pavement echoed like distant gunfire, men in dark suits entered offices that had no flags, no medals, no memorials. Inside those offices, decisions were made that would send young Americans to beaches they had never heard of, deserts they could not pronounce, jungles they could not imagine. No bugles sounded, no headlines screamed, yet history tilted. The American public would be told the war was inevitable, necessary, moral. But inevitability is often manufactured. In the early 20th century, the United States stood at a crossroads it barely understood. Officially, it was a nation reluctant to involve itself in foreign wars. Unofficially, it was already entangled, financially, industrially, quietly. The country had discovered something more powerful than armies alone, the ability to profit from global chaos while appearing morally distant from it. Factories in Pennsylvania and Michigan did not sleep when Europe burned. Steel flowed endlessly. Ammunition lines ran day and night. Ships were built faster than they could be named. And while American mothers believed their sons were safe an ocean away, American capital crossed that ocean without hesitation. Banks extended credit. Corporations extended contracts. Investors extended patience. War, after all, is not fought in a day. It is financed years in advance. What most Americans never saw was how deeply the stock market began to synchronize with distant explosions. Prices rose and fell not on rumors from Main Street, but whispers from embassies, cables from foreign capitals, and intelligence reports that never reached the evening news. When artillery thundered in Europe, Wall Street listened carefully. The First World War did not merely reshape borders, it rewired the relationship between military power and finance forever. The United States entered the war late, but it emerged transformed. Its factories were stronger, its banks were richer, its global influence was undeniable, and perhaps most dangerously, its leaders had learned a lesson that would echo through the century. War could be controlled without appearing to be controlled. After the armistice, Americans celebrated peace. Parades marched, monuments were raised, but beneath the surface, the machinery never stopped. Instead, it refined itself. Lessons were cataloged, networks strengthened. The next conflict would not be improvised, it would be optimized. Between wars, America told itself a comforting story that it had returned to isolation, that it had learned the cost of intervention. In truth, it had only changed tactics. Military force rested, but industrial and financial power continued expanding, silently laying the groundwork for something far larger. By the time the Great Depression hit, the nation was desperate, angry, and searching for certainty. Markets collapsed, trust evaporated, millions were unemployed. But even in ruin, opportunity existed, especially for those who understood cycles of fear. Fear, after all, moves markets faster than hope. As Europe once again slid toward catastrophe, the United States watched closely. Officially neutral, publicly cautious, privately alert. Factories that had slowed during peacetime were retooled. Contracts were discussed under neutral language. Supplies moved through intermediaries. The American economy, still wounded from depression, began to stir. Production meant jobs. Jobs meant stability. Stability meant political survival. and war meant production on a scale no civilian program could ever match. This was not coincidence, it was alignment. When conflict finally erupted overseas, the stock market reacted before the headlines did. Certain sectors surged, others quietly repositioned. Analysts spoke of defense readiness and strategic manufacturing, careful phrases that masked a simple reality. War was good for some people, very good. The average American saw newspaper photos of burning cities and felt sympathy. Investors saw projections. Intelligence agencies noticed this pattern too. They understood that information, who would fight, where, and for how long, was more valuable than gold. And information, once obtained, did not stay confined to war rooms. It flowed, it leaked, sometimes deliberately. The line between intelligence and investment blurred. When the Second World War finally dragged the United States fully into its grasp, the nation mobilized with stunning speed. But what looked like sudden unity was the result of years of preparation. Supply chains were already in place, financial frameworks already approved, corporate leadership already aligned with government objectives. The war economy did not emerge, it activated. American military power expanded beyond imagination, but it did not do so alone. It marched beside corporate giants, financial institutions, and investors who understood that victory abroad would cement dominance at home. Factories became temples of patriotism. Workers were heroes, executives were strategists, profit was framed as necessity. Questioning this arrangement became unpatriotic, and yet behind closed doors, balance sheets told their own story. Some companies multiplied their value tenfold during the war years. Stock prices soared even as casualty lists grew longer. Entire fortunes were born in the shadow of death, protected by secrecy and justified by national security. The public did not see the full picture and was never meant to. Victory in 1945 did not end the system, it perfected it. The United States emerged as the world's dominant military power, but also as its financial anchor. The dollar ruled. American markets dictated global flows, and war, now rebranded as conflict, policing actions, or defensive measures, became a permanent feature of the international order. The Cold War was not a single struggle, it was an era, an environment, a justification. Military budgets ballooned, intelligence agencies expanded, new enemies were identified, not always because they were the most dangerous, but because they were the most useful. Fear became renewable, threats could be extended indefinitely, markets adapted beautifully. Defense stocks stabilized as long-term investments. Entire industries existed solely because tension never truly ended. Every crisis, real or exaggerated, caused predictable ripples across trading floors. Wars no longer needed declarations, they only needed narratives. And behind those narratives, financial instruments quietly adjusted. For the American public, the story remained simple. Freedom versus tyranny, democracy versus chaos, good versus evil. For those inside the system, the story was more complex and far more profitable. Intelligence briefings shaped not only military strategies, but market expectations. Analysts who could read between classified lines gained enormous advantage. Timing mattered, entry points mattered, exit strategies mattered. A war delayed by months could mean billions lost or gained. This was not conspiracy, it was structure. The system did not require evil intent, it required incentives, and incentives did the rest. By the time the nation entered conflicts in Asia, then later in the Middle East, the model was mature. Military force would lead publicly, economic consequences would follow predictably. Stock markets reacted not with panic, but with calculation. Even tragedy had patterns. What made this relationship truly powerful was its invisibility. Americans did not see themselves as a nation driven by war profits. They saw sacrifice, service, and defense, and those elements were real. Soldiers fought bravely, families suffered genuinely, but above them all hovered a layer of decision-making untouched by bullets. The generals planned battles, the politicians sold them, and the markets absorbed the outcome. This was the foundation of modern American power, a fusion of military strength, financial dominance, and intelligence precision, each reinforcing the other, each justifying the other, each protected by the language of necessity. To challenge this system was to challenge stability itself, and stability, once achieved, defends itself fiercely. By the end of the 20th century,